Week 1 down, week 2 upon us, and it's one of the best weeks of all college football. Cyhawk week. Yes, here we go. You open up Twitter and you have two fan bases just going at each other's throats. Love it. Love it. I know some people don't like hate week. Some people hate, just how there's constant BS between both sides. As a sports fan, it's one of the best parts. The Lakers Celtics, Red Sox Yankees, Ohio State Michigan. And in the state with no professional teams, Iowa State's the Super Bowl. And it is an amazing atmosphere. I've been to a handful of Iowa State games, been fortunate enough to go to a couple of Iowa State games, and they're amazing. The atmosphere is unlike anything that you see typically in the regular season. Once, this year for Iowa State, there's going to be a lot of opportunities for some really rowdy Jack Trice atmospheres. Iowa, you always have great atmospheres. I was at the Iowa-Penn State game, but man, there is just an added element. Even in those great games and great atmospheres, there is an added element with the Cyhawk game, and I can't wait to break it down this week with you guys. Welcome, everyone, to the Media Row podcast with me, Justin Miller. As always, these shows are brought to you by Stevens Automotive and Sales and Kelly's Little Nipper at 1701 East Grand Avenue in Des Moines. Kelly's Little Nipper, great hangout spot, great place to go watch the Cyhawk game this weekend, great place to watch any game this weekend because they have great food, great drinks, and even better community. 1701 East Grand Avenue in Des Moines. Kelly's Little Nipper, a proud sponsor of the Media Row podcast. When you go there, make sure to use the keyword Woodley, as in Coach Woodley for the Drake Bulldogs. Use the keyword Woodley, and your first drink is on the house. If you're a Hawkeye, Cyclone, Bulldog with a bye week, go over there to Kelly's Little Nipper and get that first drink for free using the keyword Woodley and have a great time over there at 1701 East Grand Avenue in Des Moines, proud sponsor of the Media Row podcast. So I know on Wednesdays we said we were going to start doing Wednesdays with Woodley. Well, Drake has a weird schedule with some early buys. So they had their game, of course, on Thursday, which they beat Upper Iowa. This week's a bye week, which I don't think Drake always has to have a bye week, but I think they benefit with not having their kickoffs at the same exact time as Iowa State. Because when I was a student broadcaster, man, talk about bad luck. It just seemed like Drake always got scheduled at the same exact time as Iowa State. This year, a bye week, so everyone can enjoy the Cyhawk game, and then it'll allow for more fans to go into Drake Stadium for the next time they're home. But we usually do Wednesdays with Woodley. We're changing it up because we're just going to do Wednesdays with Woodley on game days. So today, why not Wednesdays with Walters? We're getting John Walters, the play-by-play voice of the Iowa State Cyclones, on the show to just kind of recap the 2 weeks for Iowa State, preview, of course, the Cyhawk game, but also just dive into the history of the Cyhawk game, what he has witnessed in his long and successful career in Ames. So, without further ado, going to shut up and going to get into a great chat with a great mentor of mine, someone I've always looked up to, John Walters, the play-by-play voice of the Iowa State Cyclones. John, thank you as always for doing this for me. I assume where you're at right now, you just got done with the press conferences for this week for the football team. How'd those go?
Oh, they went well. The Taylor Mauser press conferences are always among the most entertaining things in the world. And when he affectionately referred to Rocco Becht as a psychopath today, I think that was the one that kind of got everybody's attention. And it was funny as heck, just a great explanation of why he admires him for that. Just it's his commitment to the game and how much he's in there working on it. And it was awesome. It was a typical Mouse answer. And I could see why guys love playing for the guy. He's just so laid back and fun. And they just have a blast playing for him. And he's a great offensive coordinator. He's very, very creative, I think he's grown a lot. Just even with he even mentioned today that even within the last 2 years, he's less afraid now to make mistakes. He's more willing to just lay it out there and trust his guys. And so um, it's always enlightening to hear what he has to say. And that was one of the highlights today. Lots of good stuff from Matt too, just about the rivalry and how you have to kind of keep it in the right perspective. And people want to get caught up in the frill things, but to him, it's yes, we recognize that it's a bigger game than most, but at the same time, we also understand that we can't treat our preparation any differently. And I thought that was interesting. And so, good stuff from both of them. And then the players came in and they all had some good things to say as well. So obviously, Gabe Burkle from Cedar Rapids, he grew up, he was an Iowa fan when he was a kid growing up. And, here he is playing against him. And Caleb Bacon from Lake Mills, for the kids from Iowa, it's pretty special. But I think the Rocco Becks and John Tez Williams of the world, who were the other guys that came in today, they recognize what a big deal it is to those Iowans. They want to play well for them and for the sake of the team in general. And so it was a good day.
I want to go back to that psychopath you guys have there under center in Ames.
Yeah.
Rocco Beck, that has to be up there, I would assume, as one of the best single player performances you've been able to call. That was incredible to watch on TV. Video game-esque is the best way I could put it, of just a guy that was on point with everything.
Yeah, I mean, really for the whole team to be locked in the way they were was so impressive, coming off Ireland and all the questions about how do you deal with coming back and, getting ready for that sandwich game that's between that one and Iowa and, what's the focus of the team going to be? And there was so much attention to that last week. Well, the guys answered that with a resounding, we're ready. They were really locked in and laser focused. And a great example of that was Rocco. I mean, to go 19 of 20 and just move the ball around, one catch that helped him go 19 for 20. Bramer made an incredible catch with the ball at his feet early in the game, which was not Rocco's best throw. But I mean, when you're nitpicking like that to try to find one that kind of bailed him out, you're doing pretty well. And he's just so in command of everything right now. He has this presence about him, whether it's in the huddle or at the line of scrimmage or in practice, where you just feel great about having him take that snap. You feel like something good is about to happen. And I know I feel that way. I'm sure his teammates do and coaches do. And there's a real trust there. And it's such a big advantage to have a veteran quarterback. When, like the new rankings were released today and, there's 15 teams ahead of Iowa State, and that's fine. A lot of those 15 teams, I wouldn't trade quarterbacks with Rocco Becht with those teams. And I'm not saying anything bad about their guy, but a lot of those guys don't have a lot of experience. And experience is such a huge deal for that position. We've heard the coaches talk about sending Rocco up there with more than one play in his head, and he can kind of pick the one that looks best against the front that's being presented to him. And you just can't do that with a freshman quarterback, but you can do it with a guy who's a third-year starter that studies the game the way he does. And so I would just say the confidence level of the whole football team is very high right now, and Rocco's right at the heart of all of that.
When you talk to Rocco, is there sense of maturity from last year to this year? Is there a different mindset he has? Because, man, it feels like he's taking a step up. And I was one of those guys who, at the start of the season, was really questioning how this passing game will look in Ames with 2 1,000-yard receivers gone. And it seems like Rocco's just taking a step up, if anything.
Yeah, I don't notice anything really different in interviews with him as far as his demeanor or anything like that. I do think he's a very confident guy. I think he's always been that way. I mean, he'll tell you that he is, he's come a long way in terms of his comfort level. And, now that he's in his second year with the same offensive coordinator, I think that really helps too, to get them on the same page and really the same offensive staff. Coach Landry, the running backs coach, is the only new offensive coach this year. So to have, Coach Pauly and Coach Clanton and Coach Mauser all back in their positions, and him back, and Jake Waters, who's his quarterbacks coach, who's does just a great job with the quarterbacks. I think it all kind of works together to make him feel really comfortable. And that's, I guess, the best way I can describe it. He just looks comfortable out there. He doesn't look rattled at all. And that's another part of the psychopath thing that, Coach Mauser was talking about. The game can be the way he really wanted to make the point. And it's interesting because I've often made this comment about Matt Campbell. I think what Mouse was really trying to say is the crazier things are around Rocco, the better he is. So if the team's behind and they're, needing a big drive, he's better in that moment even than he is when things are going really well. And it's like, okay, we're playing with house money. He's at his best when you need him to be at his best. And I've always said that about Matt Campbell too. The crazier things are surrounding him, the better coach he is. And I think Rocco has that same gene. And I also say he has the clutch gene, and it's the dominant gene for him because not many people have the clutch gene that Rocco has to be able to make those big plays in that moment. And Coach Mauser definitely recognizes that.
I want to hit on one more thing from the game against South Dakota last week before we get into Cyhawk week. But I saw that Iowa State was celebrating the 2000 squad in their Insight Bowl last week. Of course, this is a show that covers a lot of Drake football. Joe Woodley was a part of that 2000 squad. Do you have any good Joe Woodley stories by chance from your time in covering Iowa State?
Well, maybe not a story, but just an anecdote. Joe was the original play both ways guy. He should have been a Heisman finalist because he would play linebacker and then he'd play fullback, in the same game. And he didn't get quite the attention of Travis Hunter for doing it, but he was doing that back then. And an old, you talk about an old school guy. Well, how about playing linebacker and fullback and playing both ways? It's what he was all about. But that was such a great reunion to have all those guys back. And I got a chance to sneak over there for the first half hour or so. People started to walk in and visit with some guys, and man, they all just appreciated it so much. I mean, that 2000 team really did kind of lay the foundation for what this program is doing right now, because they hadn't even won a bowl game in their history. And to win that 2000 Insight.com Bowl really kind of got the ball rolling, and it got Dan McCarney era rolling. It had been kind of a struggle to get that breakthrough moment. And to Gene Smith, the athletic director's credit, he gave Mac one more year when a lot of ADs wouldn't. It's one of the reasons Gene's going in our Hall of Fame here this fall. And that extra year that he gave Mac, he saw the progress, he felt it coming, and then they went out and had that 9-win season and won a bowl game for the first time. And that's a special group of guys. Ryan Harklaw from our team on the Cyclone Radio Network, Ben Brunt, who used to be in Ryan's role on our Cyclone Radio Network before he moved to Green Bay. Great friends, tremendous people. Sage Rosenfels, J.J. Moses. I mean, man, some of the Chris Anthony, I could keep going right down the line. There's so many great players. And then, of course, we've lost a few of them, Ennis Haywood. And it was neat that they recognized them as well, the players that we've lost from that team and the coaches. But really a special reunion. Mike Green from the Letter Winners Club does a tremendous job putting all those things together and really makes those guys feel at home and feel welcomed. And that was the sense I got from the event. And yeah, Joe's definitely a big part of that. And what a gift it was that Drake's schedule turned out the way it did. Not only could Coach McCarney get down to Joe's game, his debut as the head coach of Drake on Thursday, and Coach Mack was right there to take it all in, but then also because of the Thursday game, Joe was able to come up and be a part of the reunion as well. So it just all played out perfectly from his perspective.
Was 2000, was that the first year you were doing play-by-play for Iowa State full-time or no?
Well, I was doing TV games for basketball with Gary Thompson, and hadn't done football games or anything yet, or hadn't done radio yet for Iowa State. I had done it for Drake in the past, but yeah, I took over the play-by-play in 2003 when Pete Taylor passed away. And so that's when I took over the Cyclone Radio Network. And so this is my 23rd year. Pete did it for 33. So that's 56 years of just two guys doing it. And Eric Heff's been with both of us for almost that entire time. And so it must be a pretty good job if you have that kind of longevity. So it's all worked out great. And but yeah, no, I was covering that team very, very religiously for Channel 5 at the time. I was down in Phoenix for the bowl game and was covering. I was at a ton of those games that year. So absolutely a ton of great memories from that team, but I wasn't their play-by-play announcer.
With your longevity with Iowa State, I mean, it's a perfect transition into this week because, man, Cyhawk Week, it is such a special feeling because in the state of Iowa, we don't have a professional team to rally around. So this is really a Super Bowl like atmosphere is what it feels like. I remember as an elementary school kid, people like teachers wearing their jerseys in support and thinking that was so cool. And I was talking to you before we clicked record how I love how everybody at work is just talking about this game and Cyclone fans. Great 2 weeks, and yet they're still going, I don't know what to expect. And that's a great that means it's a great rivalry when you can have two teams, no matter how good or bad. You're expecting a great smash mouth game.
Yeah, and the first 15 years I covered it were the 15 years in a row that Iowa won. And so you didn't have that feeling as much during those years. It was just dominance by Iowa. Well, since then, it's really been a pretty even series since Iowa State finally broke through in 1998. And so it is awesome. It's great for this state. It's great for people outside this state to see how much passion there is for college football in this state. And that'll be on full display with Big Noon Kickoff here this weekend. And so I think that is a tremendous, you talk about what are the value of these athletic programs to our state. And I think that's a big topic right now because NIL money and trying to figure out ways, can the state support in some way, trying to keep these programs as competitive as possible. I think it's really important that they do because you look at what successful football means for Iowa State and Iowa. Look at the infomercial that's coming into Jack Trice Stadium this Saturday for 2 hours, even before the game, you're going to have a 2-hour infomercial for our state. You're going to have another 4 hours after that of infomercial for our state. I mean, it's incredible what it does for this state nationally and then especially locally. The Iowa Corn Growers Association does a great job putting together this series and making all the sports count. But they have stats that show that 70% of the people in this state are watching this game. 70% are locked in, engaged in this game, either whether it be watching or listening on the radio or however you want to say it. That almost everybody in the state is locked in and watching this thing play out. So it is huge for our state. We don't have professional sports for the most part, basically, and this is our professional sport. And this is our biggest event. I can't think of a bigger event in the state of Iowa than the Iowa Corn Cyhawk Series football game. I really can't, as far as a sporting event in this state. Now, I know it's a big deal when like IndyCar comes to Newton or, some of the things that happen. But as far as an event put on within the state that the people of this state care about, you're not going to find a bigger one than this Saturday.
So I had a listener reach out and actually has a really good question for you about just your time with the Cyhawk game and your time with Iowa State, what you've experienced in terms of the coaches, the different coaches that have taken over for Iowa State and how they approach the Cyhawk game. Because you alluded to it earlier, Coach Campbell is very much so a guy who's like, this is an important game because it's week 3. It's our third game. And you have other coaches, like I remember as a kid, Paul Rhodes seemed very animated as like, this is a crucial game. Just from your experience, what have been the different attitudes towards the Cyhawk game and how have you seen them work to benefit and maybe not work as well?
Well, I think, Jim Walden, it was hard because he never was able to break through and he came close several times, but that was a tough deal because I don't think he felt like he could get strong enough footing to really make a dent in that. He was hoping he could outcoach their guy. That's how he approached that. He wasn't going to out-talent Iowa during those years, but he thought he could maybe outcoach him. And there were a couple times where he probably did and came very close to winning those games. But when Coach McCarney got here, it brought on a different mindset of, if you're going to break through in this series, the first thing you better go do is win a recruiting battle with Iowa. And that finally happened. Bill Maher saw from, oh gosh, a little town right near Waterloo, and I'm trying to think of the name of it. But Billy Marsaw was a really good lineman that had an Iowa offer that Iowa State offered and really recruited hard. And he was kind of the first guy in that MAC era to say no to Iowa, yes to Iowa State. Because Walden kind of stopped recruiting guys when he knew that Iowa was in on him. He just said, let's just go focus on some guys in Omaha or whatever, And I just think MAC felt like you have to win that recruiting battle. And then you have to go beat them to prove you belong. And it took him a while to break through. But when he finally did in 98, he never shortchanged how big the thing was to beat them and what it would do for his recruiting. And so when he broke through in 98 and finally ended that 15-year streak, then that started a streak of 5 consecutive wins for Iowa State, which really changed the whole landscape of the series. And so Mac loved it. Of course, he grew up in it. He was a player for Iowa. He was a captain for Iowa. He coached at Iowa. He came to Iowa State, so he knew better than anybody what this meant. But I think the one thing with Coach Campbell is he doesn't downplay it. He knows it's huge. He really does. But he also knows that if you're going to win, you can't go out and say, okay, it's Iowa week, so we have to practice this much harder or do this much differently. It's the same. You're cheating the process is his point if you don't do that every week. And we saw that last week. I mean, if Iowa State had said last week, okay, it's South Dakota, we can kind of take our foot off the gas, they probably would have had a much harder time. And you see what the results are of that kind of preparation, that commitment to the process that may sound boring and cliche to fans, but is absolutely at the heart of what Matt's success at Iowa State has been.
When looking at this game, the past few games for Iowa State, when we were talking before Dublin, we first mentioned the quarterback battle, and that's how it's been the past 2 weeks of, Bowman had a story with Iowa State. He had experience here. This week, it's different. I'm not paying attention to the quarterback battle. I went straight to the kickers, which I don't think I've ever done.
Yeah.
After Conradi hits that record-breaking 63-yard field goal, and then Drew Stevens, not long after, hits a career high. And it's just really cool to see the kickers getting kind of pumped up for this one nationally. But also, man, we always talk about this game. It seems like it's always going to come down to special teams.
Yeah, and I think both programs feel really, really good about their special teams right now. And that's not always been the case. But the kicking game in particular is just rock solid. Tyler Perkins has the all-time punting average record for Iowa State. He's a tremendous punter. Conradi is off to a great start. He had a great year last year. He's off to a great start this year. So Iowa State feels really solid about its kicking game. Well, so does Iowa. Drew Stevens is a terrific kicker. You've got a great punter in Reese Dakin, one of the best they've had. And so, they feel great about their kicking game. Then you look at the return game. Well, Caden Weechin last year led the NCAA as far as combined punt and kickoff return yards. So he's an outstanding returner. We've seen him break several long ones in his career. We saw what Aiden Flora did last week for Iowa State. Broke 2 long punts. One would have been a 99-yard return for a touchdown if he didn't step out of bounds by a toenail.
I wish he did it because the call was great on TV.
Yeah.
I heard your call later on, and that was great. Like, just a toenail, like you said. He was so close.
But he's a great story, too. He's a walk-on from Adel and a great story. And but you also have Xavier Townsend, who was an outstanding returner for UCF. And so I think, both teams couldn't feel much better about their special teams going into this game. And you're right, it probably will play a big role in the outcome. But I don't think either team has any thoughts of coming into this game without a lot of confidence in that area.
I want to get into the depth chart because today I heard that Coach Matt Campbell mentioned the linebacker and Carson Willich is questionable. Iowa and their depth chart didn't have running back Kamari Moulton. We know going into the Cyhawk game for Iowa State to have success, it's really going to come on that defensive end of slowing down Iowa's run offense. And it starts at that linebacker position. So it seems like the Cyclones 3 weeks in, are already going to have to lean into that depth of their linebackers, which they had to do last year too.
Yeah, well, and it's not as desperate yet as certainly as it became last year. But Yeah, Carson Willock had a great game one. I mean, he was awesome over in Ireland against Kansas State. He was one of the best players on the field. So they would definitely miss him if he's unable to go this week. But that is one of their deepest spots at that will linebacker spot because they have Will McLaughlin and they also have Bo Goodwin. So they have two other excellent players that they really like at that spot. So that's where that depth that came into play from last year with so many guys forced into duty is really paying dividends because now you see a true two deep and really three deep at every linebacker position. And so would love to have Carson this week. Hopefully he'll be good to go by game day. But if not, there's other guys with experience that have played well and played well in this series. They can step in there and do the job. But yeah, you never want to start seeing injuries stack up. And so far, I'd say Iowa State has been relatively healthy through these first two games, and it's a long haul. They're going to have two more games here and then a bye, and I think having 3 bye weeks on their schedule can really help them to stay healthy all season long, hopefully, at least relatively healthy, because you're never going to be fully healthy.
Yeah. What are you eager to see improve for Iowa State this weekend? Just after 2 weeks of play so far into the year, they've looked really good on both ends of the ball, but there's always room for improvement.
Sure.
From your perspective, what are you excited to see improve this weekend against Iowa?
Well, I know what I'd like to see improve. I don't know how easy it's to do against Iowa. It would be a more consistent run game, and that's their strength is slowing the run game. This is a series where if you can run and stop the run, you're probably going to win. And if you went back and looked at the history and counted up the wins for each team that have done that, I might have to do that this week. Go back and look at the last 20 games and just see which team has won the rushing battle. And I would guess that team has won 75, 80% of the time. So Iowa's going to be locked into stopping the run. Now, having said that, Rocco Becht makes that much more difficult because he's an excellent quarterback, and Iowa State's really multiple in the way they're attacking right now with the tight ends and the receivers in the passing game and just all the different looks that they're giving teams. We'll see if they can create some openings and get some big plays, but it's hard to do that against Iowa. They're so rock solid. Phil Parker's a tremendous defensive coordinator. They're simple in what they do and the way that they do it, but it's just they're so good at it, and so it's just hard to run the football against them with any consistency. And that's really the one thing. Iowa State's had good runs and good run plays, and things have been decent there. But to get that good, consistent run game, like we saw at the end of the Kansas State game where Carson Hansen was chewing, getting those 6, 7 yard, 8-yard runs, that's what I'm talking about. I'd like to see more of that throughout games. But sometimes it takes a while within a game for those things to happen. And maybe sometimes you have to pass to set up those kind of running situations, or you have to establish something else in order to get that kind of consistency. But I think both teams are going to have a hard time running the ball. Now, Iowa's going to be very intent on doing that. That's their strength. And they rushed for over 300 yards last week against Albany. They have a really good offensive line. They're going to try like crazy to establish the run. So is Iowa State. It's a stubborn chess match usually to see which team can establish the run. But if I was going to pick one area where I'd love to see some improvement from Iowa State, that would be it.
So with this being another year of you behind the mic calling a Cyhawk game, is there a different energy for you as well going into these games?
Yeah, I love them. I mean, the bigger the game, the more excited I get. And these are always big games. And, it's been way too long since Iowa State's beaten Iowa in Ames. I mean, 2011 was one of the all-time classics. Steele Jantz, James White with the game-winning touchdown, 44-41 in triple overtime. But that's the last time Iowa State beat Iowa in Ames, and Matt Campbell hasn't beaten them yet here. And he's won 3 times over there, since then, but he hasn't been able to break through here. So I'll be excited. Obviously you're going to have big noon kickoff. You're going to have one thing that's annoying and yet energizing at the same time is the extra 20,000 people that come hang out and go to the tailgating without having tickets to the game, because it just adds to the congestion, and so you're just, fighting that all the time. But it does add energy to the outside of the stadium when that translates right into the stadium. So there's no doubt you do get a little extra rush of adrenaline anytime you're playing Iowa, really in any sport. And but football special. I mean, we talked about what a big deal this game is to the people in this state. So to get the privilege of calling it on the radio is just really something I never take for granted. I'm very blessed to be able to do it, and it's been a lot of fun.
Well, John, I want to finish with this one, just with your time covering the Cy-Hawk series. And it's been one, the past few years, it's back and forth, it seems like, for both of these teams. Have you noticed, is it easier for a team to win 2 in a row, or is it easier to have that victory as a comeback, as a revenge in this rivalry?
Yeah, it feels like the latter. I mean, Iowa State's been winning in Iowa, and Iowa's been winning at Iowa State. So it feels like it's kind of the opposite of what you'd expect, a home field advantage, home field maybe disadvantage in this case. So that's kind of the way the series has gone, which again goes back to your original point of you just don't know what to expect. I mean, because all those years people kind of expected the home team to win, and then it doesn't happen. And so it is a very unpredictable series. It is and you're right, that's what makes a rivalry, is when you just say it doesn't matter what's happened week 1, week 2. It doesn't matter. It's Iowa State and Iowa. And that's what we have. And so, I don't know how anybody can, gamble on these games or, say that they're sure they know what's going to happen, because I don't think the coaches do. I don't think the players do. I know I don't. And, but you love the idea of going to find out. And one thing that's unusual from an Iowa State perspective in this game this year is that they played Kansas State. And so usually, now this game is going to be on September 6th, right? Well, heck, there's been a lot of seasons where Iowa State hasn't played a game by September 6th, and now they'll have played 3 games, including their 2 biggest rivals, by the night of September 6th. But usually when Iowa State plays Iowa, they'll have had kind of a tune-up game, but not in both teams have, or they've both been in kind of the same boat, just like Iowa did a week ago. But then that's the first real test of where do you stand and what are you really? And you have to kind of find out. And I think Iowa's in that boat this week because they will find out a lot more about themselves through this game. But I think Iowa State is in the process of having some of those answers and a little bit further along in that regard because they played Kansas State. And that exposed, okay, here's what you need to work on. Here's where you need to get better. And so having a game like that under your belt, I think does give Iowa State a bit of an advantage. But we'll see. I mean, advantages, disadvantages, guesswork. It's all exactly that. It's guesswork. So we'll see on Saturday.
We'll see, I think, is the headline, or should be like the title for this rivalry.
That should be
game.
That's the headline. Absolutely. Exactly right.
Can't thank John enough. Always a pleasure to have him on the show. It's still kind of a pinch me moment, to be able to have John on the show. I used to imitate him when playing football inside the house. And my dad still to this day laughs about it and jokes about it. But going to be a really fun weekend. If you're a Hawkeye, a Cyclone, this is one of the best weekends in all of college football here in this state. Absolutely love it. Even as a guy who is a diehard Drake fan, I covered Iowa State for about a year and a half, went to a lot more Iowa State games as a kid. But man, just absolutely love when these two go head to head. It's always going to be close, but I will save my preview of this game for Friday's show, where we have a lot to get to on Friday. So NFL preview, College Football Week 2 preview, Cy-Hawk preview, all that stuff coming on Friday. But before we wrap up today's show, need to give a shout out to Stevens Automotive and Sales at 5320 Northwest Beaver Drive in Johnston, Iowa. 35 years of family owned and operated here in the state. Doesn't matter if you're a Cyclone or Hawkeye, go over to Stevens Automotive and Sales and they're going to treat you right. No BS over there at 5320 Northwest Beaver Drive in Johnston, Iowa. 35 years of family owned and operated here in the state. When you go to Stevens Automotive and Sales, make sure to let them know that Media Row sent you. Huge thank you to John Walters. If you guys have missed any of this week's show, make sure to go to the YouTube page at Media Row Pod, or wherever you get your podcasts, you can download it. Make sure to like, subscribe, all that good stuff. Make sure to follow us on social media as well, as we always put up clips of the show and some promotions as well throughout the year. So, huge thank you to the listeners. Love you guys. Really appreciate you tuning in each and every day. So that'll do it for today's show. We will see you Friday for the Media Row podcast.